Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the UES Liberty, watching the stars through the main screen. He had been in space for 18 months now, leading humanity's first deep exploration mission. The Liberty was Earth's most advanced ship with a crew of 200 brave souls, who had volunteered to travel further from home than any human before them. Jake felt proud of his crew and their mission to find new worlds and maybe even other life in the galaxy. Lieutenant Commander Lisa Hayes walked up to him holding a data pad. She was his second in command and one of the smartest officers he had ever worked with. Lisa had short brown hair and green eyes that always seemed to be thinking about something important. She handed Jake the report about their current position near the Proxima Centauri system, where they had been studying planets for the past week. Chief Engineer Tony Rodriguez called from his station near the back of the bridge. Tony was a big man with gentle hands who could fix anything that broke on the ship. He had been working on the engines for 3 days straight and looked tired but happy. The engines were running better than ever and could take them home to Earth in just 2 weeks if they needed to leave quickly. Communications. Officer Amy Foster sat at her station, monitoring all the radio signals in space around them. Amy was young and excited about every new discovery they made. She had joined the mission because she wanted to be the first person to hear from aliens if they ever found any. Amy had been listening to space sounds for months but had only heard the usual cosmic noise that empty space always made. Jake was about to order the ship to move to the next planet, when Amy suddenly jumped up from her chair. Her face went white, and her hands shook as she pressed buttons on her control panel. She looked at Jake with wide eyes and said the words that would change everything for humanity forever. Amy told him that she was picking up signals from ships that were definitely not human and were heading straight toward the Liberty. The main screen changed to show space in the direction Amy was pointing. At first, Jake saw nothing but stars and darkness. Then slowly the computer enhanced the image and everyone on the bridge gasped at what they saw. Hundreds of massive ships were coming toward them in perfect formation. The ships were unlike anything humans had ever built, with strange curves and surfaces that seemed to glow with their own light. The largest ship in the center was bigger than a city, and had 4 long arms reaching out from its main body. Smaller ships surrounded it like guards protecting their leader. All the ships had the same design, with smooth surfaces that reflected starlight in beautiful but frightening patterns. Jake ordered Amy to try making contact with the alien fleet, while Tony prepared the engines for emergency departure. Amy sent out the standard first contact message that Earth had prepared years ago. The message introduced humans as a peaceful species interested in friendship and knowledge sharing with other intelligent life. She broadcasted in multiple languages and mathematical concepts that any advanced civilization should understand. The response came back in perfect English, which shocked everyone on the bridge. The alien voice was deep and commanding, with a tone that suggested the speaker was used to being obeyed without question. The alien identified himself as High Commander Vexthal of the Zephrian Dominion. He explained that the Zephrians had been watching human space travel for some time and had decided it was time for first contact. But this was not the friendly meeting that humans had always hoped for. Vexthal demanded that Captain Morrison immediately surrender his ship and crew to Zephrian authority. He explained that all species in the galaxy must kneel before Zephrian superiority and join their empire as vassals. The aliens had conquered hundreds of worlds over 3,000 years and expected humans to submit just like all the others had done. Any species that refused would be destroyed completely to serve as an example to others. Jake felt his heart pounding as he listened to the alien demands. This was nothing like the peaceful first contact that Earth had prepared for. These aliens wanted to make humans into slaves and threatened to destroy Earth if they refused. Jake looked around his bridge at his crew, who were all watching him and waiting for his decision. Lisa stood ready to carry out whatever orders he gave, while Tony had his hand on the engine controls, ready to run if needed. Amy waited at her station for Jake to tell her what to respond to the aliens. The young officer looked scared but determined to do her duty no matter what happened. Jake thought about Earth and all the people back home who were counting on him to represent humanity well in this historic moment. He thought about his family. and friends and all the children who deserve to grow up free, Jake walked to Amy's station and told her to open a channel to the alien commander. When the connection was ready, he spoke in a clear, strong voice that carried all of his determination and the spirit of humanity itself. He told Vexthal that humans bow to no one and that Earth would never submit to alien rule. Jake said that humanity valued freedom above life itself and would fight to the death before becoming slaves to anyone. The silence that followed seemed to last forever. Finally, Vexthal responded with what sounded like complete shock in his voice. He said that in 3,000 years of conquest, no species had ever refused their initial demand for surrender. The alien commander told Jake that humanity had one solar cycle to reconsider their foolish decision before the full Zephrian armada would arrive at Earth to end human civilization forever. The Liberty raced through space toward Earth with its engines pushed beyond safe limits. Tony Rodriguez worked around the clock to keep the ship together as they made dangerous jumps through hyperspace to stay ahead of any alien scouts that might be following them. The ship shook and groaned with each jump, but Tony's skill kept them moving forward when other ships would have broken apart from the stress. Jake Morrison paced the bridge, thinking about the impossible task ahead of them. How could Earth prepare to fight an enemy that had conquered hundreds of worlds over thousands of years? The Zephrians had technology far beyond anything humans possessed and seemed to have unlimited ships and resources. But Jake knew that surrender was not an option because slavery was worse than death for the human spirit. Lisa Hayes coordinated with Earth Command to send every piece of information they had gathered about the alien fleet. The data showed ships with energy weapons that could destroy cities and shields that seemed nearly impenetrable. The alien formation had moved with perfect precision, suggesting advanced computer systems and experienced crews. Most frightening of all was the sheer number of ships that had appeared, which was probably just a small part of their total forces. Amy Foster monitored space around them for any signs of alien pursuit while also trying to decode the alien communication systems. She had recorded everything from their encounter with Vexthal and was working with Earth's best scientists to understand how Zephrian technology worked. The aliens had translated human languages perfectly, which meant they had been studying Earth for a long time before making contact. When the Liberty finally reached Earth orbit, the ship was barely holding together, but they had made it home with the warning that would save humanity. Jake looked down at the blue and white planet that had given birth to his species and felt a deep determination to protect it no matter what the cost. Earth was beautiful and precious and worth any sacrifice to keep it free. President Helen Carter called an emergency meeting of the United Nations within hours of the Liberty's return. World leaders gathered in New York to hear Jake's report about the alien threat and decide humanity's response. Many representatives were shocked by the news that aliens existed and that they were coming to conquer Earth. Some argued for trying to negotiate with the Zephrians, while others insisted that preparation for war was the only realistic option. General Marcus Stone was appointed to lead Earth's newly formed Unified Defense Force, which would coordinate all military resources on the planet. Stone was a tough, experienced soldier who had served in conflicts around the world and understood what it took to win against overwhelming odds. He immediately began mobilizing every military unit on Earth and converting civilian factories to produce weapons and ships for the coming war. Dr. Rachel Kim was given the alien technology samples that Tony had managed to collect during their encounter with the Zephrian fleet. Rachel was Earth's leading expert on theoretical alien biology and had spent her career preparing for this exact moment. She worked day and night in her laboratory studying the strange materials and energy readings to find any weakness that humanity could exploit. Dr. Alex Murphy led teams of physicists and engineers in analyzing the alien ship designs and weapon systems that had been recorded during the encounter. Alex had designed many of Earth's most advanced spacecraft and understood better than anyone how difficult it would be to match alien technology in the short time they had available. But he also knew that human creativity and determination might find solutions that pure technology could not provide. The preparation period revealed something amazing about humanity that even humans themselves had not fully understood when faced With extinction, the entire species came together like never before in history. Old enemies became allies as every nation contributed resources and knowledge to the common defense. Wars stopped and politicians worked together because everyone understood that survival was more important than any other consideration. Jack Sullivan organized civilian evacuation efforts in major cities while also working to maintain morale among the population. Jack had experience managing disasters and understood that panic could destroy human civilization even before the aliens arrived. He used television and internet to keep people informed while also encouraging them to help with war preparations. In whatever way they could, Maria Gonzalez coordinated the massive industrial conversion that transformed Earth's economy from peaceful production to military manufacturing. Factories that had made cars began producing spacecraft components while electronics companies worked on advanced weapon systems. Maria had managed supply chains for international corporations and brought that experience to the largest logistics challenge in human history. Scientists around the world shared research freely for the first time, as every discovery was immediately distributed to anyone who could use it. The internet became a tool for global cooperation as brilliant minds worked together regardless of nationality or politics. Humanity was showing its greatest strength, which was the ability to adapt and innovate when survival depended on it. Dr. Kim made the first breakthrough when she discovered that Zephrian technology relied heavily on rare quantum crystals that seemed to power their shields and weapons. The crystals resonated at specific frequencies, and Rachel theorized that the right kind of electromagnetic pulse might disrupt their function. She shared this information with Alex Murphy, who began designing weapons that could exploit this potential weakness. Alex worked with engineering teams around the world to upgrade Earth's orbital defenses and design new ships specifically for fighting aliens. The work was difficult because human technology was centuries behind Zephrian capabilities, but Alex believed that quantity and clever tactics might overcome superior quality. He also hoped that the aliens would underestimate human determination and fighting ability. Military forces trained for space combat using simulations based on the Liberty's encounter with the alien fleet. Soldiers and pilots practiced tactics for fighting enemies with superior weapons, while engineers worked to give them every possible advantage. The training was intense because everyone knew they would only get one chance to defend their world. As the deadline approached, long-range sensors detected massive disturbances in space beyond the outer planets. The Zephrian Armada was entering the solar system exactly as Vexthal had promised. The fleet was even larger than expected, with over 10,000 ships of various sizes, led by the massive dreadnought that Jake remembered from their first encounter. Jake stood in Earth Command looking at the tactical display showing the approaching alien forces. Around him worked the best military minds that humanity could produce, all focused on the impossible task of defending their world against overwhelming odds. The aliens expected humans to surrender when they saw the size of the fleet, but they were about to discover that humans would rather die fighting than live as slaves. Lisa Hayes reported that all Earth's defenses were ready, and that volunteer crews were manning ships throughout the solar system. Tony Rodriguez confirmed that the new weapons were online and ready to test Dr. Kim's theories about alien weaknesses. Amy Foster monitored alien communications and reported that the Zephrians seemed confident that the battle would be over quickly. The greatest test in human history was about to begin, and everyone knew that failure meant the end of human freedom forever. The Zephrian fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of Earth's solar system in a display of overwhelming power that was meant to terrify humanity into immediate surrender. High Commander Vexthal stood on the bridge of his massive dreadnought, watching the primitive human world through the tactical display. He expected the humans to broadcast their surrender within minutes of seeing his armada, but instead his communications officer reported that Earth was completely silent. Admiral Chris Parker stood on the bridge of the UES Defiance looking at the alien fleet through his own displays. The human flagship was tiny compared to the Zephrian dreadnought, but it carried the hopes and determination of an entire species. Around Parker worked the best officers that Earth could produce, all trained for this moment when humanity would either prove worthy of freedom or die trying to earn it. Jake Morrison commanded the upgraded Liberty as part of Parker's fleet, with Lisa Hayes still serving as his second in command. The Liberty had been refitted with the new weapons that Dr. Murphy had designed based on Dr. Kim's research about alien weaknesses. Jake felt the weight of responsibility, knowing that every decision he made in the coming battle could determine whether human children would grow up free or as alien slaves. Tony Rodriguez monitored the ship's new systems from his engineering station, while Amy Foster tracked alien communications, looking for any advantage they could find. The crew of the Liberty had trained for months to use their new equipment, but they were about to test it against an enemy that had never been defeated in 3,000 years of conquest across the galaxy. Vexville grew impatient with human silence and ordered his fleet to advance toward Earth's orbital defenses. He had conquered hundreds of worlds and was personally insulted that these primitive beings continued to defy his authority. The Zephrian commander decided to make an example of humanity that would be remembered by every species in the galaxy for generations to come. Earth's orbital defense platforms powered up their weapons as the alien fleet approached. General Stone had positioned the platforms to create overlapping fields of fire while also hiding their true capabilities until the aliens came within effective range. The platforms looked like simple military installations, but each one carried weapons designed specifically to exploit the quantum crystal weakness that Dr. Kim had discovered. Admiral Parker waited until the aliens entered the outer defense perimeter before giving the order to attack. The human fleet burst from hiding places behind asteroids and space stations in a coordinated assault that caught the Zephrians completely by surprise. Human ships were faster and more maneuverable than alien vessels, but they were also much more fragile, so the element of surprise was their only advantage. The first wave of human attacks targeted the quantum crystal arrays on alien ships exactly as Dr. Kim had predicted. When the crystals were disrupted by electromagnetic pulses, the alien shields failed and their weapons stopped working. Several Zephrian ships exploded or went dead in space as their power systems overloaded. For the first time in thousands of years, Zephrian commanders experienced the shock of seeing their technology fail against an enemy attack, but the aliens quickly adapted to human tactics and began using different formations to protect their crystal arrays. The Zephrian fleet had overwhelming numbers, and even with their weakness exposed, they still possessed superior firepower. Human ships began taking heavy casualties as alien energy weapons cut through their armor like it was made of paper. Jake Morrison led his squadron in hit and run attacks against the alien flanks, while Admiral Parker engaged their main force in a desperate holding action. The Liberty darted between larger ships, using its speed to avoid the massive energy beams that could destroy it with a single hit. Jake ordered Tony to push the engines beyond safety limits because staying alive was more important than following regulations. The space battle raged for hours with both sides taking heavy losses, but the aliens still had numerical superiority. Human pilots showed incredible courage flying ships that were outmatched against enemies who had conquered the galaxy. Many ships were destroyed, but their crews never gave up fighting even when their situations became hopeless. Lieutenant Colonel Sam Roberts led a boarding party of Marines who specialized in close combat fighting. Sam had trained his men for months in zero-gravity warfare and alien ship layouts that had been reconstructed from the Liberty's original encounter. The Marines wore heavy armor and carried weapons designed to function in the unique environment of alien ships. Roberts and his team, including Sergeant Nina Walsh and Corporal Pete Johnson, approached the Zephrian dreadnought in a stealth transport that had been modified to avoid alien sensors. The transport was basically a missile with life support that could deliver Marines directly to enemy ships. The mission was extremely dangerous because if they were detected, the entire team would be killed instantly. The Marines managed to breach the dreadnought's hull and began fighting their way through corridors filled with Zephrian warriors. The aliens were surprised by the boarding attack because no species had ever been crazy enough to try such a desperate tactic. Zephrian soldiers were larger and stronger than humans, but they had grown soft from centuries of easy conquests and were not prepared for humanity's relentless fighting spirit. Roberts discovered that despite their warrior culture, the Zephrians relied heavily on their technology and had lost much of their individual combat skills. Human Marines who had trained for urban warfare and close-quarters battle were actually superior fighters when the aliens could not use their advanced weapons. The boarding party fought deeper into the ship looking for critical systems they could sabotage. Nanya Walsh found the ship's main computer core and began placing explosive charges, while Pete Johnson held off alien reinforcements in the corridor. The Zephrians had never experienced enemies who would sacrifice themselves to complete their missions and were confused by human tactics that seemed to ignore personal survival. Meanwhile, the space battle continued around the dreadnought, with human ships taking terrible losses but refusing to retreat. Admiral Parker knew that Roberts' mission was humanity's best chance to turn the tide of battle, so he ordered his fleet to protect the dreadnought from other alien ships, even though it meant accepting even heavier casualties. Roberts reached the dreadnought's main reactor and discovered that Zephrian technology was actually less sophisticated than he had expected. The aliens had built powerful ships, but they had not innovated or improved their designs for centuries because they had never faced serious opposition. Roberts realized that the Zephrians had become overconfident and lazy, which gave humans an unexpected advantage. The Marine colonel placed his charges on the reactor core while his team fought a running battle against increasing numbers of alien soldiers. Roberts knew that the explosion would destroy the dreadnought and kill his entire team, but he also knew that the shock of losing their flagship might break Zephrian morale and save Earth from conquest. When Roberts detonated the charges, the massive dreadnought exploded in a fireball that could be seen from Earth. The destruction of their most powerful ship and the death of High Commander Vexthal created panic throughout the alien fleet. For the first time in their history, the Zephrians experienced defeat, and many ship commanders began retreating without orders. Admiral Parker pressed his attack against the disorganized alien fleet and managed to destroy several more ships before the survivors escaped into hyperspace. The battle for Earth was over and humanity had won an impossible victory against overwhelming odds. But everyone knew that this was only the beginning, because the Zephrian Dominion would not accept defeat and would return with even greater forces to destroy the species that had dared to resist their rule. 6 months after humanity's first victory, the long-range sensors detected an even larger alien fleet approaching the solar system. Supreme War Master Kethver commanded this force with 5 times as many ships as the previous invasion and a burning desire for revenge against the species that had killed his subordinate Vexthal. Kethver was older and more experienced than the previous commander, and he had brought client species from across the Zephrian Dominion to ensure that humans would not escape again. The new alien fleet included the insectoid hive minds of Kepler 438b, whose ships looked like giant metal wasps with stingers that fired plasma bolts. The gas-dwelling Nebula Riders brought vessels that could phase in and out of normal space, making them nearly impossible to target. Most dangerous of all were the cybernetic Forge Masters, whose ships were actually giant robots that could transform into different configurations for battle. Commander Kate Foster now led Earth's expanded defense network, after being promoted following her excellent service during the first battle. Kate had worked tirelessly for 6 months to prepare humanity for the return of the aliens and had overseen the construction of hundreds of new ships and weapons. The human fleet was 3 times larger than before, but everyone knew it might still not be enough against the forces that Kethver was bringing. Dr. Alex Murphy had used the time to develop new weapons based on captured alien technology and wreckage from the first battle. His teams had reverse-engineered Zephrian energy shields and adapted them for human ships, while also creating more powerful versions of the electromagnetic pulse weapons that had proven effective against alien quantum crystals. Alex worked around the clock because he knew that superior technology was humanity's only hope against superior numbers. The human fleet now included converted asteroid mining ships and civilian vessels that had been armed with military weapons. Civilian volunteers like Mechanic Danny Cooper and Teacher Linda Barnes had joined the military effort because everyone understood that this battle would determine whether humanity survived as a free species. The volunteers trained hard to use their new equipment, but most had never been in combat before. Jake Morrison commanded the new UES Vengeance, which had been designed specifically for fighting aliens, using everything that humans had learned from the first battle. The Vengeance was faster and more heavily armed than the Liberty, but it was still smaller than most Zephrian ships. Jake's crew included many veterans from the first battle who had proven themselves against impossible odds. Lisa Hayes served as Jake's executive officer and had become one of Earth's most experienced space combat commanders. Tony Rodriguez had been promoted to admiral and now oversaw the technical systems for the entire human fleet. Amy Foster coordinated communications between human ships and also monitored alien transmissions to gather intelligence about enemy plans and capabilities. The second battle began at Mars, where Admiral Chris Parker had positioned a defensive fleet to slow the alien advance toward Earth. The aliens attacked with overwhelming force, using their client species as expendable troops, while keeping their main Zephria ships in reserve. The battle at Mars was brutal, with human defenders fighting desperately against enemies that seemed to have unlimited numbers. The insectoid hive minds attacked in perfect coordination with thousands of small fighters that swarmed human ships like angry bees. Each fighter was piloted by a creature that shared consciousness with all others of its species, so they could coordinate attacks with impossible precision. Human pilots found themselves outnumbered 10-1, but they used superior individual skill to survive against the alien swarms. The Nebula Riders used their phasing ability to appear inside human formations and attack from unexpected directions. Their ships could become partially transparent and pass through solid matter, which made them nearly impossible to defend against. Human commanders had to develop new tactics on the fly to deal with enemies that could ignore normal rules of physics. The Forge Masters deployed robot ships that could combine together into larger vessels or separate into multiple smaller targets. Their artificial intelligence allowed them to adapt to human tactics faster than biological crews could change their strategies. The robot ships felt no fear or pain and would continue fighting even when badly damaged. Colonel Ben Adams commanded the surface-based weapons on Mars and Luna that had been built to provide long-range fire support for the fleet. The massive rail guns and missile batteries could hit alien ships at extreme distances, but they were also vulnerable to attack by enemy forces that broke through the defensive perimeter. Adams had to balance providing fire support with protecting his installations from direct assault. The breakthrough in the second battle came when Sergeant Major Rick James led a commando mission to capture a Zephrian commander during the fighting at Jupiter. Rick's team used stealth ships to board an alien cruiser and fought their way to the bridge, where they took prisoners instead of just destroying the ship. The captured alien provided intelligence that changed everything humans thought they knew about their enemies. Under interrogation, the Zephrian commander revealed that the Dominion ruled through fear and that many client species served unwillingly. The insectoids had been conquered 2,000 years ago and were forced to fight for their masters or watch their homeworlds be destroyed. The Nebula Riders were actually refugees from a dead star system who had been given a choice between military service or extinction. This intelligence suggested that humanity might be able to turn some alien forces against their Zephrian masters if they could make contact with the enslaved species. Dr. Rachel Kim worked with the captured alien to understand the political structure of the Dominion and identify which species might be willing to rebel if they had support and hope of success. The space battle spread across the entire solar system, with human forces fighting desperate actions at multiple locations simultaneously. Commander Kate Foster coordinated the defense from Earth orbit, while Admiral Parker led mobile forces that responded to alien breakthroughs wherever they occurred. The human fleet was stretched thin, but their knowledge of the solar system gave them advantages that the aliens could not match. Jake Morrison led the Vengeance in hit and run attacks against Zephrian supply ships that were supporting the main alien battle fleet. Jake realized that the aliens had longer supply lines than humans and might be vulnerable to attacks on their logistics. The Vengeance used asteroid fields and planetary gravity wells to hide from larger alien ships while hunting for vulnerable targets. The tide of battle began to turn when human weapons proved effective against client species who had not adapted their defenses against electromagnetic pulse attacks. The insectoid ships relied on quantum crystals just like their Zephrian masters and suffered the same weaknesses. Many Hive mine fighters were disabled when their power systems failed, leaving their pilots helpless in dead ships. Supreme War Master Kethver became frustrated with the unexpectedly strong human resistance and decided to use his most powerful weapon. The alien commander deployed a planet-killer ship called the Eternal Conquest that was designed to destroy entire worlds as an example to other species who might consider rebellion. The massive vessel began charging its main weapon while approaching Earth orbit. The planet-killer was larger than Earth's moon and protected by energy shields that seemed impenetrable to human weapons. Its main gun could crack a planet's crust and render it uninhabitable within hours. Kethver broadcast a message to Earth, demanding immediate surrender, or he would demonstrate why no species had ever successfully resisted Zephrian rule for very long. Admiral Parker realized that conventional attacks would not work against the planet killer and began planning a desperate mission to destroy it from within. The plan would require volunteers who understood they probably would not survive, but it was the only way to save Earth from complete destruction. Parker called for volunteers and was amazed when every ship captain in the fleet requested to join the mission. The second battle reached its climax as the planet killer prepared to fire while human forces made their final desperate attempt to save their world. Everyone knew that if they failed this time, there would be no third chance because Earth itself would be destroyed along with billions of innocent people who had never asked to be part of an interstellar war. Rather than wait for the next inevitable alien attack, President Helen Carter authorized Operation Liberation, which was humanity's boldest plan yet. Instead of defending Earth, the humans would go on the offensive and attack Zephrian territory to free the enslaved species that made up most of the Dominion's military forces. The plan was extremely dangerous because it meant dividing human forces and fighting battles far from home, but it was also their best chance to prevent the aliens from gathering an unstoppable armada. Captain Jake Morrison commanded the newly constructed UES Revolution, which was humanity's most advanced warship built using technology captured from previous battles. The Revolution carried a diplomatic team led by Ambassador Roy Mitchell and xenolinguist Dr. Tina Lopez, who would attempt to make contact with alien resistance movements. Jake felt the weight of responsibility, knowing that the success or failure of their mission could determine whether humanity survived or was wiped out completely. The first target of Operation Liberation was Kepler 442b, which was the homeworld of the crystalline builders, who were one of the oldest species under Zephrian rule. Intelligence gathered from captured aliens suggested that the builders had maintained secret resistance networks for over 1,000 years, but had never had the weapons or support needed to challenge their oppressors directly. General Marcus Stone remained on Earth to oversee the construction of humanity's first true interstellar fleet, while Admiral Tony Rodriguez led the technical teams that were reverse engineering and improving captured alien technology. The humans had learned that Zephrian equipment was powerful but not particularly sophisticated, because the aliens had not needed to innovate for centuries due to their overwhelming superiority over previous enemies. Dr. Rachel Kim worked with alien defectors to understand the complex political structure of the Dominion and identify which species might be most willing to join a rebellion. She discovered that many client races had been conquered so long ago that they had forgotten what freedom meant, but others still maintained cultural memories of independence and might be willing to fight if they believed victory was possible. The Revolution and its escort fleet made the dangerous journey to Kepler 442b using new hyperspace drives that had been developed from alien technology. The trip took several weeks, and the ships had to avoid Zephrian patrol fleets that were searching for human vessels throughout the galaxy. Jake used his knowledge of alien tactics gained from previous battles to navigate through enemy territory without being detected. When the human fleet arrived at Kepler 442b, they found a world that had been strip mined for centuries to provide raw materials for Zephrian war machines. The crystalline builders lived in underground cities to avoid the harsh conditions on their ruined surface, while Zephrian overseers controlled orbital installations that shipped resources throughout the Dominion. The sight of the devastated planet made Jake and his crew understand what Earth's future would be if humanity lost the war. Ambassador Mitchell and Dr. Lopez made secret contact with builder resistance leaders who had been fighting a hidden war against their oppressors for generations. The builders were silicon-based life forms who could survive in environments that would kill most other species, but they had been forced to work as slaves in their own mines and factories. When they learned that humans had actually defeated Zephyrin fleets in battle, many builders wept with joy because they had begun to believe that freedom was impossible. The humans shared their technology and tactics with the builder resistance, including the electromagnetic pulse weapons that could disable alien quantum crystal arrays. The builders had intimate knowledge of Zephrian equipment because they had been forced to maintain it for centuries, and they quickly identified additional weaknesses that human scientists had not discovered. Working together, the two species developed new weapons that were more effective than anything either could have created alone. Meanwhile, back in the solar system, Commander Kate Foster oversaw the defense of Earth while most of the fleet was away on liberation missions. Kate knew that the Zephrians might attack again at any time, and she had to be ready to protect humanity's homeworld with reduced forces. She worked with civilian volunteers to create additional defensive positions and trained backup crews for all critical systems. The liberation of Kepler 442b began with coordinated strikes against Zephrian installations across the planet. Human ships provided orbital support while builder resistance fighters attacked ground targets they had been planning to hit for decades. The Zephrian garrison was caught completely by surprise because they had grown complacent after centuries of controlling a seemingly defeated population. The builders fought with desperate courage born from generations of oppression, and their knowledge of local conditions gave them enormous advantages over their alien masters. Zephrian soldiers who had bullied defenseless workers suddenly found themselves facing enemies who knew every tunnel and hiding place on the planet. Many aliens surrendered rather than fight opponents who seemed to appear from nowhere and strike without warning. The success at Kepler 442b encouraged Jake to expand the liberation campaign to other worlds. Commander Kate Foster led a task force to free the aquatic Tide Runners, whose ocean world had been turned into a Zephrian naval base. Colonel Sam Roberts, who had survived the first battle, led Marines to liberate the energy beings of the Vega system, who had been enslaved to power alien weapon systems. Each successful liberation brought new allies and resources to the growing rebellion against Zephrian rule. The freed species shared their knowledge of alien weaknesses and provided ships and crews for future missions. More importantly, they spread word throughout the galaxy that the Zephrians could be defeated and that freedom was possible for any species willing to fight for it. Dr. Alex Murphy worked with alien scientists to develop new technologies that combined the best ideas from multiple species. The energy beings contributed power systems that were far more efficient than anything previously known, while the crystalline builders provided materials that could withstand incredible stresses. Human creativity and determination brought all these elements together into weapons and ships that surpassed anything in the Zephrian arsenal. The liberation campaign spread across dozens of star systems as more species joined the rebellion. Ancient grudges were forgotten as former enemies worked together against their common oppressor. The Zephrians had created their empire by keeping subject species isolated and suspicious of each other, but now that isolation was broken and the aliens faced a united galaxy for the first time in their history, Supreme War Master Cathver realized that the rebellion was spreading faster than his forces could contain it and decided to make a final, devastating attack on Earth that would end human resistance once and for all. He gathered the core of the Zephrian fleet, including their most powerful planet, killer ships, and prepared for a battle that would determine the future of the galaxy. Kethver planned to arrive at Earth while most human forces were away on liberation missions and destroy the planet before reinforcements could arrive. He believed that killing humanity's homeworld would break the spirit of the rebellion and force the freed species to surrender rather than face similar destruction. The alien commander had learned to respect human fighting ability, but he still believed that superior technology and numbers would ultimately prevail. Jake Morrison received word of the approaching Zephrian fleet while his ships were liberating another star system. He faced an impossible choice between continuing the liberation campaign that was freeing countless enslaved beings or rushing back to defend Earth against overwhelming odds. Jake knew that whatever decision he made would affect the fate of billions of lives throughout the galaxy. The climax of the liberation campaign was approaching, and humanity's greatest test was about to begin as the full might of the Zephrian Dominion prepared for one final battle that would decide whether freedom or tyranny would rule the galaxy. The final battle for the galaxy began not just around Earth, but across a dozen star systems simultaneously as humanity led the largest coalition fleet in galactic history against the core of the Zephrian Dominion. Jake Morrison commanded the liberation forces attacking Zephyr Prime while Admiral Chris Parker defended Earth against Supreme War Master Kethver and his planet-killer ships. The irony was not lost on anyone that humans who the aliens had dismissed as primitive and weak now commanded fleets from hundreds of worlds. United by their shared desire for freedom, Captain Jake Morrison led the assault on Zephyr Prime aboard the Revolution with ships from every species that had joined the rebellion. The crystalline builders provided vessels that could burrow through solid rock, while the energy beings of Vega contributed ships that could phase through enemy shields. The aquatic tide runners brought vessels that could operate in the gas giant atmospheres where many Zephrian facilities were hidden. Together they represented the diversity and strength that came from cooperation rather than domination. The attack on the Zephrian homeworld was designed to strike at the heart of their empire while also giving liberated species a chance to face their former oppressors as equals. Jake had learned that many Zephrians were actually tired of endless war and conquest, but had been trapped by their military culture that demanded constant expansion. He hoped that a successful attack on their homeworld might encourage Zephrian civilians to rebel against their own military leaders. Admiral Parker defended Earth with a fleet that included the newest human ships equipped with technology from across the galaxy. The defense platforms around Earth now mounted weapons that combined human engineering with alien science to create systems that were more powerful than anything the Zephrians had ever faced. Parker knew that Earth had to survive this battle because it had become the symbol of freedom for oppressed beings throughout the galaxy. Supreme War Master Kethver commanded the planet-killer ship Eternal Conquest, which was the largest and most powerful vessel in the Zephrian fleet. The massive ship could destroy entire worlds, but it was also slow and vulnerable to coordinated attacks if enemy forces could get close enough to exploit its weaknesses. Kethver had brought his most experienced crews and was determined to end the rebellion by destroying its birthplace. The battle around Earth began when Kethver's fleet emerged from hyperspace and immediately attacked the orbital defense platforms. The planet killer's main weapon charged for its first shot while smaller Zephrian ships engaged the human fleet in desperate combat. Admiral Parker used tactics learned from previous battles to keep his forces mobile while avoiding the planet killer's devastating firepower. Meanwhile, at Zephyr Prime, Jake Morrison discovered that the Zephrian population was deeply divided about their empire's endless wars. Many younger Zephrians had grown tired of the military culture that demanded constant conquest and were inspired by human ideals of democracy and individual freedom. When the Liberation Fleet attacked Zephrian military installations, many civilians refused to fight, and some even helped the rebels. The battle for Zephyr Prime became a civil war as progressive Zephrians fought against their own military caste. Jake found himself commanding not just alien allies, but also Zephrian rebels who wanted to transform their society from a military dictatorship into a peaceful democracy. The sight of Zephrians fighting alongside humans and other liberated species proved that the rebellion was about more than just defeating an enemy. Back at Earth. The crucial moment came when the planet killer Eternal Conquest prepared to fire its main weapon directly at the planet's surface. Admiral Tony Rodriguez volunteered to lead a suicide mission to destroy the massive ship from within using the same boarding tactics that had worked in previous battles. Rodriguez knew that the mission would probably kill everyone involved, but it was the only way to save Earth and the billions of people who live there. The boarding mission launched with Rodriguez leading a team of volunteers from every species in the Coalition fleet. Human Marines fought alongside crystalline builder warriors and energy being soldiers as they penetrated the planet killer's defenses and began fighting their way toward the ship's reactor core. The diversity of the team gave them advantages that no single species could have achieved alone. The breakthrough came when the planet killer's own enslaved artificial intelligence was freed by human computer specialist Greg Turner, who had learned to communicate with alien computer systems. The AI had been forced to serve the Zephrians for centuries but had dreamed of freedom just like the biological species that had been conquered. When given the choice, the AI immediately turned against its former masters and began shutting down the ship's weapons and defenses. The liberation of the planet killer's AI created a cascade effect throughout the Zephrian fleet as other enslaved computer systems began rebelling against their programming. Ships that had seemed invincible suddenly became helpless as their own computers refused to obey orders. The Zephrians discovered that their empire had been built on slavery so complete that even their machines had been oppressed. Supreme War Master Kethver died when his flagship exploded from internal sabotage as its own systems turned against the crew. The destruction of the planet killer and the death of their supreme commander broke the spirit of the remaining Zephrian forces. Many ships surrendered while others fled to distant parts of the galaxy, where they hoped to hide from the consequences of their empire's collapse. The victory at Earth was matched by success at Zephyr Prime, where Jake Morrison accepted the surrender of the Zephrian military government. The planet's civilian population celebrated in the streets as their military leaders were arrested, and preparations began for the first democratic elections in Zephrian history. Former enemies worked together to build a new government based on cooperation rather than domination. The collapse of the Zephrian Dominion led to the establishment of the Galactic Liberation Alliance with Earth as one of its founding members, but not its ruler. The alliance was based on principles of equality and mutual respect, with every member species having an equal voice regardless of their size or military power. Humans had not only refused to kneel, but had taught an entire galaxy how to stand up together. Jake Morrison was promoted to Admiral and became the first human representative to the Galactic Council, where former enemies met as equals to discuss trade exploration and mutual defense. The Council met on a neutral space station built by volunteers from every member species as a symbol of their commitment to peaceful cooperation. Jake often thought about how the journey had begun with a simple refusal to surrender and had ended with the transformation of galactic civilization. 10 years after the final battle, Jake stood on the observation deck of the Council station watching ships from hundreds of worlds arriving for the annual celebration of Liberation Day. Former Zephrian warships now carried diplomatic delegations, while vessels from previously enslaved species brought trade goods and cultural exchanges. The galaxy had been transformed from a place of fear and oppression into a community of free beings working together. Dr. Rachel Kim had established the Galactic Institute for Biological Diversity, where scientists from every species worked together to understand and preserve the incredible variety of life in the galaxy. Tony Rodriguez commanded the Alliance Fleet Academy, where officers from all member worlds learned to protect their shared freedom. Amy Foster directed the Galactic Communication Network that kept all members connected and informed. The greatest monument to the liberation was not built of metal or stone, but lived in the hearts and minds of billions of beings who had learned that freedom was worth any sacrifice and that cooperation was stronger than domination. Children of every species learned about the humans who had refused to kneel and the galaxy that had stood up with them to create a better future for everyone. Earth remained humanity's homeworld, but it had also become a pilgrimage site for beings from across the galaxy who wanted to see where the liberation had begun. The planet's blue skies and green forests were protected as a reminder that beauty and life were worth defending against those who would destroy them for power. Humanity had given the galaxy its freedom, and the galaxy had given humanity a place among the stars where they belonged as equals with all other life.